Hello YouTube, Bridge Building Heathen here, and today we are going to talk a little bit about mental health. I'm doing this video because a friend of a friend who owns the YouTube channel Born Without Marbles that discusses mental health, well, she's currently in the hospital right now, and as she openly discusses on her channel, she struggles with an eating disorder, and that is something I have some experience with, but from a very different end of the spectrum. And it's not even the eating disorder you might think. I'm certainly overweight. I am mentioning that now. I'm not boogie levels of overweight, but I'm overweight. And I come from a family. My mother is a musician, and she has anorexia, and I used to do ballet, and I had bulimia. I do not now, and I don't binge or anything. I don't eat particularly unhealthily. I do probably eat more carbs than I should, especially since diabetes runs in my family, and that's a concern for me, and that's why I'm starting to try to look at things again. But that actually has a lot of after effects for me. And anyway, to be supportive of this a friend of mine who's in the hospital and can't do her usual monthly videos, I'm putting up one in somewhat of her format, which is basically just grab a cup of tea and talk and try to help people not feel quite as alone in all of their problems, in all of the painful stuff that we have in this life. So, yeah, on the eating disorders, I definitely had a problem with that. As a teen, I definitely abused ephedra products and had way too much coffee. In fact, there were days where I would take a bunch of basically diet pills, but the really stim kind. And I would drink like 2 pots of coffee, and that would be like most of what I would have for the day. And I'd have like maybe between 200 and 800 calories or so on top of that, and that would be what I would do. And if I had more than that, then it would come back up. And I don't currently binge or anything. My current eating habits are fairly typical, and I shouldn't be as overweight as I am with them, I don't think. But I still, like I said, have too many carbs for my family history. Probably my biggest issue is having bagels on occasion. I will sometimes average about a bagel a day. It's, yeah, that and salad and some form of meat, and that's like my day is that and a little bit more than that, but that's about 2/3 of it. So it gives you an idea. But yes, so I used to do ballet, and I used to be pretty good at it. I got to the point, and then I had a back injury, and I wasn't burning quite as many calories as I used to. And for me, it's always been a bit of a dance ever since I had these other disorders and issues where I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to go back into that. I don't want to get tempted to go back into all of that. But at the same time, I don't want to sit here and not pay attention to what I eat at the same time. So for me, it's definitely been a bit of a balancing act, especially since for much of my adult life, I haven't even necessarily had control over what food I can afford or get. For example, one of the healthiest things I can manage sometimes is oatmeal because it's cheap. And in college, I was definitely very, very poor. Now, I know Bering and other people have made fun of this, but I did used to do the whole quote-unquote freegan thing. There was a local grocery store that I would go to that did not do the bleach thing. Thank you, Chris Worski. And it is legal here, unlike in Canada and the UK. I want to specify that. in Canada and the UK, dumpster diving is definitely illegal, but here it has to be legal because the cops need to do it to get evidence sometimes. And the cops aren't allowed to have any special rights that the citizenry don't have, whereas in England and in Canada, and the UK in general as well, not just England, but other parts of the UK, the Crown can afford the police force special rights. That doesn't happen in the US. The police force do not have special rights. So, it's not illegal here. That doesn't stop some grocery stores from putting bleach on things, but there are mailing lists and things where people apparently reveal which stores do this and tip each other off and let people know. Anyway, because before that, I was only able to afford $15 a week for food, which in the US is crazy. I was literally eating oatmeal for breakfast and macaroni and cheese and hot dogs for dinner, and that is no way to live. That is definitely going to gain you weight. Or I was eating oatmeal for breakfast and, one of the cheap $1.50, like those little banquet meals, you've seen them in the store, or even just having ramen. And that's not a balanced diet. Even if you stick a multivitamin on top of that, which I managed to, that's, the multivitamin will help you not have total malnutrition, but it's not going to be good for your body. It's going to put your body through Hades and back. Living off of ramen is a bad idea for anyone, and it will kill you. And I hope I'm not sued by a ramen company for saying that, but, there you go. But then when I got into being able to dumpster dive, I wound up being able to have things like fresh fruit and salad and other stuff like that, and that certainly helped, but there was still the issue of, you're not exactly picking what you get every week. So, yeah. And I'm not in either of those states quite right now, but my ability to pick and choose is a little stymied right now. If you'd like me to have more freedom to pick and choose, hey, I have a Patreon. And I'd totally be happy to cover in more depth what I go into with all of that. And where that journey takes me, because I'd love to actually do things differently. I'd love to get advice from people on what to do differently. I'm thinking that for my body type and my family history, the paleo diet might actually go well for me, and I'd love to do something like that. But, because it's one of the few things I haven't tried ever. But yeah, so if you guys want to see, a chubby person go through that and be honest about the results and where all of that takes me, I'm happy to have people subscribe for that reason or what have you. But really, that's kind of where I'm at, because every single time I look at restricting, I think back to when I used to only eat 600 calories a day, and a tiny part of my brain freaks out a little bit. Or, I think back to the times when, after certain really bad events in my life, there have been whole weeks where I literally lived off of nothing but water. And I don't ever want to go back to that either. So I guess I've had a very different experience with eating disorders, because people would look at me and probably assume that I'm on the stuff your face side of eating disorders, that I have the type of eating disorder where I do nothing but eat food all day. And that's just not true. It's just that I can't necessarily afford healthy food. That the healthy food I do get is complicated. A lot of things in my life right now are kind of complicated. I guess that's everybody's life to some extent, which, is why I'm making this channel. But I guess I just figured I'd be candid somewhat. about what I'm going through with some of this, and try to be supportive that while I don't know necessarily all of what it is to have anorexia and to be afraid to put food in your body at the same time, I can kind of understand a little bit, because I used to certainly be afraid of every calorie, and now I'm somewhat afraid of going back to that fear and that mindset. And so, the balance of trying to find some sort of dietary thing where the metabolic possibilities of what will gain me weight are very, very low with it. I must be the only person who gained weight when I tried, I never went vegan, but I did try eating like one for a bit, and that just did not go well. I actually gained weight doing that. So that's why I'm looking around and going, paleo. Paleo sounds like it might actually work for my metabolism. I definitely have to be careful on anything with nuts, though. It's like I don't have the allergy, but I will gain weight from nuts. I won't usually gain weight from dairy like you might think, but I will gain weight from nuts. I know that about myself. But yeah. So this has been somewhat of a candid look at my dietary life. All I can really say is, if you have an eating disorder, all I can really recommend is, it's very hard to want to befriend your body when you're in that mindset. You keep thinking of your body as this other thing that has to be controlled and put into submission, and it becomes very hard to look at it as, in some ways, the one friend who will definitely stick by you throughout your life if you give it what it actually needs. Because we look at our bodies and we think of all of the stuff that we've been through. We think of every pound we've gained. We think of every single time someone has been, if you've been in an abusive situation, you think of that. If you've ever been sexually assaulted, you sometimes think of that. And it's very hard in those situations to have a good relationship with your body. But if you think about it, your body is the only thing that's necessarily been with you through all of that. So it's been through what you've been through. It's been through all of the same hard things that you have. So maybe this is a lesson from the yoga mat when I finally took that up in college. But actually it was really more high school age when I took that up. But anyway, one of the things taking up yoga taught me was essentially that for all of the good and all of the bad, your body has been with you there through all of those times. And it's seen every hardship you have. So in some ways you owe it to your body to take care of it for that, if for no other reason. Because it's been there with you. And I guess I'm just kind of being redundant about that, but maybe somebody needed to hear it a couple extra times. And I really hope in the future that, we look at mental health a bit different. Some of the institutions that are out there are pretty cold places, and I've seen sort of these co-op farms that have sprung up that are basically places where people can go to recover from different mental health issues, but be in nature and do things like work with animals like goats, or do things like make pottery, or basically learn a skill or a hobby that you can feel good about while in therapy. That's not just making finger paintings, but some of them even use sharp objects. You can learn woodworking as part of your mental health at some of these places. You can do farming and gardening, and everybody helps cook dinner, and they don't hide the sharp knives. People are actually trusted with it, and yes, that takes some risk, and some of these places have had 1 or 2 deaths as a result, but they feel like they actually get stronger and better results with the people that they do help. And some of that may cause controversy, but I don't think they're necessarily wrong. I feel like some of that guidance and some of that help might be the right therapy for some people. And it's not like people don't find ways in other institutions as well, unfortunately, sometimes. It's... mental health has a long, long way to go. But I feel like we're starting to look in the right direction, especially in some of these places. And I feel like there's also a lot to learn from monastic life. If you look at Catholic monks and nuns, and if you look at Buddhist monks and nuns, some of them do manage forms of communal living that most of the rest of us seem to find impossible right now. We tend to not get along with our roommates. We tend to certainly not get along in even larger communities. And I feel like if you can separate out in a secularized context, like a mental health facility, some of the social aspects that go into that versus some of the religious ones. And some people may feel that the two go hand in hand, that you need certain things, certain spiritual things in order to have that sort of cohesion. But that isn't necessarily always true. There's always some degree of human problem solving that goes into that sort of community situation. And I feel like there's a lot we can learn from that as well. Anyway, this is just me kind of rambling off the top of my head. This is me, uncensored, uncut, unedited, with all of the ums and all of the everything. And, I hope for all of you that at least you're a bit kinder to yourselves this week. If there's some area where you've been really, really hard on yourself, just try and be your own best friend a little. I know that sounds kind of weird and that's kind of hard to do, but try to look at your problems the way you would if a friend came to you with those same problems. Because all of the flaws that you nitpick in yourself, other people also are. We always assume that everyone else is oh so confident and has it all together, and that's just not true. And I was certainly anxious about coming up on here right now. I'm getting anxious because it's 19 minutes long and I'm still rambling, and I've been repetitive and I know it. But I've actually been afraid to be on YouTube. I've been afraid, what if, my friends from this part of my life find my channel? Or what if my friends from that part of my life find my channel? Or what if by having such a social media presence I become completely anathema if I need a quote-unquote normie job in the future? And I don't really have an answer to that. Hopefully someday, soon-ish, relatively, probably not soon, I eventually finish my graduate school stuff, and then I can still be my own boss in some respects. Technically, in some ways, my clients would be my boss, but I can start a therapy practice and, not have to go through the normal hiring process for that. But until that happens, I am kind of taking a risk by putting myself on YouTube. I guess everybody who is on here does. So I don't know what makes me different. In some ways I'm risking slightly less because I'm so obscure and because, I've always been a bit of an outsider. It's like risking a reputation. In my case, it's what reputation? Everybody who could ever say something mean or nasty about me in my life probably already has. And that's not unique to me, and I'll probably get into that in some other episode. I'm gonna do a side series, I think, called Beneath the Bridge, that's basically me rambling and vlogging like this. So, if you find this kind of stream of consciousness stuff interesting, you can look for that in future. But in the meantime, go out there and build some bridges, maybe with yourself.